growing up through the change of the infrastructure, shadow IT was always something to be frowned upon. We never wanted anyone outside of IT making any changes, playing with any data, or having any power within, even down into their laptops about what they could and couldn't do. As the world has evolved, shadow IT, I think, has actually become a real value to a business overall. But getting the transition from getting IT to let go of some of that control and figuring out how to expand IT out into the ecosystem is tough for businesses and for IT to do. So how have you seen it work?
I don't know that it ever really works as well as anyone wants it to.
Have you seen it as a value to the business to let shadow IT?
Yeah, I mean, I think as we've gone forward, there's companies that are doing more. I mean, IT is trying to decentralize its power. And some organizations do a better job of it than others. I think a lot of it stems from not understanding what it is we want to control and figuring out ways to decentralize that, right? Because there's policies and things that have to be in place to protect the business, and businesses that do a better job of stating what those policies are and figuring out how to share those with the different units. Those units can then take that understanding and go figure out what will help them with what they're trying to do. When you have that rub and no one's willing to solve that rub, that's when they're just going to say, all right, we're going to take our funding and we may go hire our own vendor, or even worse, let's grab a college kid that knows some Excel and can write a macro and let him go do this thing. And then 2 years later, you've got this thing that's responsible for, 8 figures worth of stuff. And it's a critical part of the business that, it can't go down, but at the same time, it's probably filled with all kinds of things that violate every policy that IT has put in place.
Right. I think as IT tried to control everything, and that's really where you spawn shadow IT. Whereas if IT is a value part of the business, it also forces IT to be the jerks in the basement because they're not working with the business. They're not trying to help the ball. They're just like, this is my kingdom. You can't change anything. You can't do anything. But in the world where marketing can go get their credit card out and sign up for Salesforce and right away start using it to have key business data, CRM data, sales pipeline, whatever else you want to customize. That's another problem is customization. But it's too easy for them to do. So if IT keeps controlling super tight, they can't move forward. Whereas if they start leveraging and making things available for Salesforce, making it easy integration to Salesforce, or email marketing campaign software, whatever, I mean, it really, everybody starts to move better, faster.
You can. I think there's some problems that arise as a result of shadow IT. So if I rewind the clock a little bit and thinking about shadow IT from when it first became coined as such, I look at it as not so much a parallel process as something that the business never even told the IT department about.
Right.
Hence the working in the shadows. It was, and that in itself caused a lot of problems. So if I'm working on the business side of things in a non-IT department, and I decide that I'm tired of dealing with the IT department because they're too.
The answer is always no.
The answer is no, and when it is yes or maybe, it takes too long. They're
too expensive.
Yeah, they're too expensive. There's so much process and red tape you got to go through. Why can't I just have what I want? So they go elsewhere and look, and they're still bringing in a solution paid for through that department and such, and things happen a little bit quicker, and not necessarily what Life Center brought before, not necessarily adhering to company policy or practice around security and other things, and that in itself can become a problem, because now did we expose ourselves because of this thing that is not compliant to our company standards? Do we expose ourselves to data leaks, data breaches, things of that nature, hacks of any kind? So I think from the old days of shadow IT, where it was a little, operating a little bit more in the dark, and IT was unaware of what was going on, to more current day where it's less like that. IT departments may know about certain things. They all still have to play well eventually. I'm of the opinion if one of the non-IT departments wants to come in and we agree on a solution that the company needs, is going to be valuable, and they have the time and budget to actually make it happen, you still have to work with the IT department in some fashion to be able to make sure, at the very least, it adheres to company policies, right?
Well, and I think that's really how you evolve forward, is that you publish those policies, that you make.
Sure.
If you want to go out and get Salesforce, that's great. Here's our security profile to get our data. Here's our security process to create users, so that you make it possible for them, so they don't have to go invent the wheel. They can show up and say, I bought Salesforce, and I don't want to pick on Salesforce because there's 1,000 applications out there that people can go get. How do I get your data? How do we trade data? And the other point you brought up about, security. Security is one aspect, but the problems that I've seen have been sources of truth for data.
Yeah.
Where does the customer record live? What is the total sales number? Is it in the ERP system, or is it in some external, sales related system? It's about creating those guidelines and making it possible for the outside world to do it without having to really follow IT's lead.
Yeah, and I'd say, cloud makes a bigger difference now, because before cloud, you had potentially solutions coming in where you were hosting it on-prem, right, in the company's data centers.
And that never worked.
And that never worked. You still needed IT to allow that to happen, or maybe not, and then IT didn't even know that it had systems running in it that non-IT departments actually put there. I always likened it to, your friends having a party at your house, but you're not invited. Right?
It's a good analogy. But I mean, that in that case, you're right. Cloud made it possible. The fact you can go get your credit card and buy a system makes it possible. When it had to be, installed in the data centers or installed in the IT closet, wherever your maturity was, that really made a mess, because IT immediately threw their hands up. I'm like, you can't do this. We don't have switch capacity. We don't have storage capacity. We don't have this. We don't have that. It was doomed from the beginning. But cloud does make it possible, and frankly makes it too easy for an immature organization, because if IT is still saying no and the business is going out and doing these things and signing up for these things, you're still going to run the same collision, because they're going to want the sales data. They're going to want the finance data. They're going to want to inject data back in, which is going to make IT really nervous.
Right.
That's where IT has to become a better partner with
Absolutely.
the business.
That's what it's all about.
And in places that are doing it better, they've got people within IT that are making a real effort to understand what the business needs are and trying to figure out how to bridge that gap. Because even if you get to a place where you agree on common policies, if IT is still too slow, they're going to abandon whatever goodwill was there to go try to implement something quickly, because it is so easy to acquire all of these cloud solutions.
Yeah, if IT is not a partner with the business, or not trying to get ahead and make a set of rules that can be adhered to, then the business will still go and do their thing, and they will come crashing into IT when they try to make a successful implementation. It won't go well.
What do you think the impact to that partnership is when non-IT departments bring in or enact shadow IT?
Bad. It's bad for IT. It's bad for the business, and it just continues to propagate the animosity between IT and the business. That we don't know what they do. They spend too much money. They're too slow. They're never on time. The business never gives us time. The business never understands our requirements. It makes it worse. But a few simple projects back and forth, a simple, here's the guidelines you need to adhere to, or here's Bob, he'll come work with you to get this project over the line. Those simple, gestures from both sides can really help close that gap.
How do you create, because I think shadow IT creates a lack of visibility into the systems that we have, the data that we're creating. I mean, how do we go about gaining more visibility into those types of systems when shadow IT is involved?
That's a tough one, because certainly documentation is not a strong suit of any part of the business or of IT. So really, I think it's, if you set up the guidelines that include, monitoring or backups or data authority records, those types of things, they have to get folded into the IT process someplace. So I think that brings some visibility, making sure that even though it's shadow IT and it's outside IT's box, if you're extending monitoring and backup and those types of policies or security audits to it, they're naturally in the loop because of that way. If they go off totally on their own and want to connect in, they're going to get missed, but they're also not going to be able to connect, because IT is a sharing partner, and here's how you connect to me.
But I also think you have to dedicate capacity to the business from IT, right?
Oh, yeah.
If you've got a set of resources working directly with the business that the business owns, they're going to get what they want, but then those folks can work with the centralized group to make sure that policy is being followed.
And it goes back to the decentralization, making IT available to the business and not just trying to be a black box. Because in the world we live in, every IT project we're doing should be about driving the business forward, making the client experience better. Well-run shadow IT, I think it helps to achieve that because IT can't be everywhere. I mean, we get squeezed a lot. There's a lot of reasons why IT isn't the size it needs to be to execute every project the business wants. But through planning of what IT can do, what the business wants to do, it can get good results.
Well, if the business understands what it wants to do and communicate. I don't know that I agree that IT can't be everywhere. I mean, maybe you can't have as many resources as you would like, but I would think that if they're doing things of value, you're going to go figure out how to get the resources you need, right?
I was thinking about IT can't be everywhere and that they can't bring the bodies to do the work in every project. If marketing wants to go out and do something, that's fine. Your liaison there then is to help that outside person get what they need.
But that's where marketing needs to put value on the work that they're doing, because if it's not valuable enough, then should they really even be doing it? And if they should be doing it, then the business should be ready to commit all of the resources needed to make it happen, right?
Well, but I mean, I guess some of that is allowing shadow IT, allowing marketing to go take their money to go do something, and IT saying, well, we'll help you. We can't do this for you this year because we have our predefined set of projects that the business agreed to. But if you found money, here's a way we can get this project done for you.
Well, so as far as like the whole planning and forecasting for the next year, the work that you're going to do, the resources that you need, should shadow IT maybe be part of that planning? We're at capacity from an IT perspective. You still want to do X number of additional projects. We align that with some shadow IT type activities, and maybe we get it all done.
I think you should include it back to your monitoring and security and stuff so that when these things happen that you can fold them in. So some operational overhead for external systems. Mm-hmm. And maybe, if you're big enough and you really know that, sales and marketing in the warehouse are going to go do their own thing, then you have that liaison. I don't want to call it a PM because it's not a PM role. It's much more about making sure the standards are followed to what IT. Maybe you plan that in your overhead if you really want to embrace it. But that transformation, I think, is hard. If you've got a department going off, if you think about in the education space, I mean, there are always different research groups doing different things. They've got IT embedded with those groups. If you've got a group like that, like the innovation group that we were just talking about, maybe they have their own dedicated IT for spinning up their things, or their DevOps guy, whatever it is. Because the other thing that I think is a big risk that can't go is having those external partners go spin up, AWS and go nutty, or Azure and go nutty with them because of the security risk. You want partners involved in all that.